Pleased to have in the studio my old sparring partner, Judson Phillips, an attorney, founder of the Tea Party Nation, contributor to the Washington Times. JudsonPhillips.com is his website, and Judson Phillips with 2 L's. And you were an active never-Trumper.
I was.
A Tea Partier who was a never-Trumper. Why?
Because I'm a constitutional conservative, and I believe in the Constitution. The Constitution puts limits on power, and one of the reasons I was so strongly in the Never Trump camp is I don't believe that Donald Trump will stay within the bounds of the Constitution. Now, I'm going to say this: since the election,
I don't believe he's ever read it.
Well,
but that's a whole nother thing.
He talked about the 12 articles of the Constitution, and
right.
for anybody who's not aware, the Constitution only has 5.
Right.
But you know, I will say this: in the what we're I guess a week since the election, he has sounded much more presidential, much more restrained, which is a good thing. But you know, I'm waiting to see what happens. He is an alpha male type, and there's nothing wrong with that, except his entire experience as a CEO of his own organization. He's not used to people saying no to you.
Yeah, he's never had a board of directors that he's accountable to.
Yeah,
he's never been accountable to anybody other than his father. Yeah, his father's dead.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, nobody says. I mean, that's why Donald Trump on Twitter. I mean, finally, somebody in the campaign, about 3 weeks before the election, took his Twitter account away from him.
Right, apparently.
And, you know, I don't know if that was Steve Bannon, Kellyanne Conway.
I think it was Kellyanne. I think she's the one who restrained him.
It could be.
But let's get to the issue that we were going to debate here, or we were going to discuss. You wrote a piece for The Hill. It's titled "Republicans Just Say No to Tax Extenders" by Judson Phillips. And you talk about the creature of the Potomac Lagoon strikes again, and specifically, the tax extenders that you're upset about are here it is. But Congress knows it thinks more than the free market. Extending this bizarre tax. Oh, here it is. Back in December 2015, Congress rushed through a package of tax extenders at the last minute. Included were these wasteful provisions were the wind power tax credit. Wind power tax credit subsidizes wind turbines to generate electricity. Without those subsidies, wind power would exit the market quickly because it's not competitive. But first of all, that might have been true 3 or 4 years ago. I'm not sure that that's true right now. But setting, and you point out, you know, even Warren Buffett.
Warren Buffett's now infamous quote.
Yeah, we want the tax extenders. Cool. Did I just make your case, or do you want to add to that? Because I want to push back on it. But you should be making your case.
Well, you pretty much hit it square on. I don't think that the government should be picking winners and losers in the marketplace, and I don't think. And this is something I think a lot of your audience would probably agree with me on. I don't think the government should be sitting there subsidizing wealthy billionaires who are putting in these wind power turbines, and you can substitute anything else for the wind power turbines. There just happen to be a good example of it. But I don't think the government should be subsidizing these wealthy billionaires to go out and do these things that the market won't support. Some guy who's out there who's trying to make it on $10 an hour, assuming he can have a full-time job. Why is this guy having to pay taxes to support Tom Steyer, who wants to spend all this money on wind turbines, or Warren Buffett? For your audience, if they didn't hear the quote from Buffett, Buffett said the only reason we put these wind turbines up is because of the tax credit. If it wasn't for the tax credit, it wouldn't make sense.
Right. Okay, and you build a good case. Here's my rebuttal. Number one, tax credits like that started, and the government, by the way, our tax dollars started and built the internet. Turned out to be a pretty good thing, right? Sometimes, Alexander Hamilton, in his 1791 report on manufacturers to Congress, said we should subsidize vital industries, and that became the policy of the George Washington administration, and it became the policy of the United States from 1793 until 1980. And it still is the policy of the United States, but it was 1980 with the Reagan administration that people started pushing back and saying, no, we shouldn't. The private market doesn't solve these problems. When Franklin Roosevelt became president, telephones were all over the cities. But the telephone companies refused to run their lines out to the rural areas because it wasn't profitable. They just said, screw the people in the rural areas. We can't make money on them. And so he created the REA, which was like a tax extender, the rural or RTA, the Rural Telephony Administration. Similarly, they didn't want to extend electricity out to the rural areas, so they created the REA, the Rural Electrification Administration. So, which is another variation of this. I would submit to you that as long as we are either A, having to get our electricity from coal, which is killing all of us, it's causing cancers, it's creating enormous amounts of toxic waste that I think, frankly, are even more dangerous in some cases than our nuclear waste, and it's supporting the Saudis and other countries that are supporting terrorism that we shouldn't be giving money to, that rather than spending hundreds of billions of dollars every year with the fleets, the military fleets all over the world, tracking the and protecting the oil lanes, which is a huge subsidy, which is paid for with taxpayer dollars. Rather than that, let's put that money into wind power. Let's put that money into solar power. Let's make America energy independent, even if it takes some tax dollars to do it. And frankly, this is exactly what Donald Trump is talking about in his infrastructure thing. This is public-private. This is mostly being done by private investors who have a very small subsidy in the form of tax credits. What's wrong with that?
All right, the tax credits that we're talking about, I don't like the government picking winners and losers. I think that's the job.
If we're talking about blue jeans, I agree. But we're talking about electricity. We're talking about what fuels the economy. We're talking about part of the commons.
Absolutely. Electricity fuels the economy. And by the way, I agree with you on the Saudis. They're our enemy. We should be cutting them off. There shouldn't be another tanker coming across. We can replace it with American oil, clean American coal.
We can replace it with wind power.
If the market will support wind power, I'm all for it.
Why does it take the market?
Why should we support it?
Because it's best for us.
Says who? We have multiple sources.
Says all the people who have gotten cancer from living downwind of one of Koch's refineries or living downwind of one of these coal-fired power plants.
Hey, I live in Tennessee, where we have the Tennessee Valley Authority, mostly coal-fired power plants.
A government
it's not a problem.
Which was started. It is a problem. It's killing people. You've got hundreds of billions now of tons of fly ash, coal fly ash that's radioactive, that's filled with heavy metals. This stuff has destroyed entire cities when these dams break and this stuff gets down. You've got a big problem there in Tennessee, Judson.
We've got the filters on the coal-fired power plants clean up 99% of the toxins that come out of there.
That are going into the air. But what about the stuff that's left over?
It's disposed of properly.
It's not disposed of properly. You've got giant piles of this stuff all over the country, and they tend to stick them in poor minority neighborhoods because it's poison.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you on that.
There's no analog to that with wind power. Wind power is clean.
Wind power works when the wind blows. When the wind doesn't blow, you've got this big, ugly turbine sitting up there doing nothing.
20% of all the electricity being generated right now in the state of Texas, 22% of all the electricity right now being generated in the state of Iowa is coming from wind power. It's very successful. There are parts of this country where the wind pretty much blows all the time. It's because the earth rotates all the time.
If wind power can be competitive on its own, see, I don't have a hatred for wind power. I have a problem with the government. I have a problem with the government, again, going back to this whole issue of why should some poor guy out there who's
you're opposing the government. I think you're defending the petro-billionaires.
No, I don't like the government spending money to subsidize people like Tom Steyer and Warren Buffett. Why, or Elon Musk, for example. I'll throw him in there as another example. Again, why should some poor guy who's working in Walmart trying to support his family making a wage that both you and I would consider unacceptable?
Judson, you know that's a BS argument. A person working at Walmart is probably submitting less than a penny a year to the federal government and their taxes to pay for these wind credits. You know that's a BS argument. This is a principle, an argument of principle. You can't take this down to the level of the average person because they're not paying extra taxes for these wind credits. Or if they are, it's so inconsequential and insignificant. This is 1,000% of the federal budget. It's an irrelevant amount of money.
There was a guy from
10,000%.
There was a guy from Tennessee named Everett Dixon. Great quote: "Billion here, billion there. Pretty soon you're talking real money." And
right, it was 1967. He said that.
Yeah, and he comes from right around the corner from where I am. But
Everett Dirksen was a great man. But Everett Dirksen also believed that the government should subsidize industries that will benefit the United States. Everett Dirksen, I believe, I'd have to go back and look, but it's been a lot of years. But I used to be a huge fan of Everett Dirksen, who was a conservative Republican, but he was an honest man. And there were a lot of New Deal programs that he did not fight. This was back when the Republican Party was not, let's roll back the entire New Deal. Let's just roll back the parts that we disagree with. And the TVA wasn't one of the parts that the Republicans, by and large, in the 1960s, 50s, and 60s disagreed with. And this is just the TVA, the REA. This is let's build 21st century infrastructure. And you're sitting here arguing for 19th century energy that kills people and that supports terrorists.
No, I'm arguing for...
Why do you love the terrorists?
I don't love the terrorists. I'm arguing for market efficiencies. I don't want the government getting in here and screwing things up. I don't want the government, again, picking the winners and losers. You know, here's something.
You know, when it comes to blue jeans, you're right. But this, like as I said, this is not blue jeans. We're talking about how we power our country.
Right, let's talk about that. Solar power, for example. Solar power has, thanks to the market, is now becoming efficient and affordable, competitive within the market.
That's not thanks to the market. That's thanks to government subsidies. The original solar technologies were developed by NASA.
The original solar technologies and the original...
We paid for that.
That's right.
It wasn't the market.
No, it was originally developed from NASA. Private enterprise took it over and took it to the next step.
Because of subsidies. We've been subsidizing solar in this country since 1977, when Jimmy Carter got that through Congress.
And the subsidies today for solar are nowhere near what the subsidies for wind power.
They're almost completely gone. You're right, because it's a fully developed industry. The price of solar has dropped more than 99% since 1976.
That's my point.
Excuse me.
When wind power got started in the early 1990s, a guy named Charles Grassley, who's still in Congress today, said his argument for wind power subsidies, let's subsidize this for 4 or 5 years. That's what it will need to get on its feet, and then we won't need the subsidy anymore. Well, that was almost 25 years ago. They still need the subsidy.
But Moore's law is being applied to that, too. And I think probably within a year or two, we won't need those subsidies. But what about the $5 trillion a year in subsidies worldwide to the fossil fuel industry? What about the $300 billion a year here in the United States that we're subsidizing the oil, gas, and coal industries with? I'm guessing you'll give lip service to getting rid of that, but I've never heard a Tea Partier talk about it. And I think that's probably because, you know, so much of the Tea Party came about as a result of petro-billionaires like the Kochs.
Do you know how the Tea Party actually started? Because I was a part of it starting.
The original Tea Party was started by the tobacco industry as a PR. It absolutely was. Look it up.
No, I was a part of the original Tea Party.
It's Singer, you know.
No, he had nothing to do with it. Rick Santelli did his rant.
Rick Santelli's rant they knew in months in advance that was going to happen. That this was all choreographed.
Rick Santelli's rant started in February. Within 24 to 48 hours, activists, some of us knew each other, some of us didn't know each other, from across the country were meeting on conference calls. It wasn't set up by the Kochs or Big Tobacco or anybody else. It was people like me, people like friends of mine who set this up. We're just average, everyday people. And we launched this movement.
Well, you know, good on you if you want to. You know, if you created a movement and you took over a good chunk of the Republican Party, and now you control the House, the Senate, and the White House. You know, I get it. I honor that. I'm impressed by that. I want to do the exact same thing in the Democratic Party. In fact, that was my last hour. But you know, the bottom line on this is if wind power is genuinely competitive now, then yeah, let's start scaling back the incentives. I don't disagree with that. But if it's not fully competitive with heavily subsidized gas, oil, and coal, then let's continue to subsidize it until it is, because we've got to get off this carbon addiction. It is killing us.
Question: at what point, if wind is not competitive, let's say 2 years from now, wind's not competitive, when do we end this? Because I mean, how long does this have to go before we say, okay, wind's not competitive, it's never going to be competitive?
Let's end the subsidies for fossil fuels first.
I'm not in argument with that. Or I'm not in disagreement with that.
But you are not advocating that. You could have written a piece for The Hill that says, you know, Koch Industries is getting huge government subsidies for their fossil fuel production, but you didn't. You're talking about wind power.
Wind power is actually passed. I was talking about the other tax extenders in general that is going to come out of this lame duck session.
Judge, we're
out of time.
Yeah, we're wrapping it up here.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Judson Phillips, attorney, founder of the Tea Party Nation. JudsonPhillips.com is his website. You can tweet him at Judson Phillips with 2 L's or at Tea Party Nation. Thank you, Judson.
Thank you.